Fei.
A negative machine. I'm not here. It is undoing me.
Fei.
Fei means on something. It's also shorthand for Africa. Africa, shortened to just Fei. Fei.
It is undoing me.
Fei.
Fei on something, or Africa.
We're looking at how Western objects and your names are written in Chinese. And we're going to start with the birthplace of coffee, Africa.
Quite often you'll come across an emoji or character with a kind of binary state. This is where its original meaning is quite commonly used, but it's also used as a sound to sound out the names of foreign objects, people, or countries.
On something.
It is undoing me.
Fei.
It's also shorthand for Africa.
So this little dual state emoji here can either mean on something, most commonly uncommon. So this emoji Fei with the emoji for common would be uncommon. That's the most common usage. If someone's asking you how the food was, you can say it's this, common, and good. So uncommonly good. It can mean unlawful if you have this and lawful. And that's why we built it on the chassis of King, using a little antimatter machine or a negative unmaking machine. So it's essentially the King with these two poles down and a gap in the middle.
On something.
It is undoing me.
Fei.
It's also shorthand for Africa.
But in its other state, it's used simply for its sound, Fei, and it's used to write out a Fei li ka, four emojis, which was later just shortened just down to the second one, this Fei. So it can mean Africa. So if you have North and this, North Africa, South and this, South Africa, this with continent, African continent, and so on. So it really represents this dual state where the un and negative and non meaning is extremely common, but also, Africa is an extremely common topic of speech.
Fei.
Just as we saw with Maddie over here, where the bit on the right is a pronunciation hint and the bit on the left is a Cluedo-style hint as to the meaning of the overall character, we look at Fei and there's just, it's just Fei. It really just has, it's an entire building block, all of its own right. But what we'll see is Fei getting recycled as a visual building block, as a pronunciation hint. So if we go to a lineup of characters involving Fei, and these are pretty much all of the entire set of characters you would ever encounter in Chinese which have Fei as a building block. Here we see one with a little mouth on the left, and we saw with mouths before, they're kind of like a spoken punctuation, or they're a character that was created with a kind of a blank meaning and just simply for a sound to sound out foreign objects. And in this case, this is the Fei from
Coffee.
Fei.
The Fei from
Cafe.
Fei.
we have this little mouth here to the left-hand side of the Fei. And this mouth is, again, it's either going to be like spoken punctuation. It's the Cluedo hint that the entire character is either spoken punctuation, which the Chinese do, or it's some kind of blank meaning emoji that's just used for kind of foreign loan words, as in words imported into China that they needed a Chinese approximation for.
Coffee.
Fei.
the Fei from
Cafe.
Now, it's also the Fei in morphine, Mafei, and endorphin, Nei Fei Su. And those are the three uses, really. But mainly it's just coffee. And this is your Fei. Now, the way the Chinese treat the names of foreign objects, or people, or countries, is the most un-emoji-like aspect of the language. So, if you can even call them emojis, essentially, they're like very from a design perspective, they're very poorly designed emojis because they don't look fundamentally like what they represent. However, it's when they start using the sounds of their emojis to approximate foreign names of countries and things that it starts to get a little frustrating. Usually, if you have a reasonable comprehension of Chinese, you can read through a context and get a good grasp of what they're on about. And then you come to these emojis that don't seem to make any sense. Now, if you start sounding them out and you sound them well, sometimes you might realize you're approximating a foreign person's name, like an Obama, or Tulasa Truss. However, because they don't have an alphabetic language, and our alphabet, for example, an F is quite a short, snappy little consonant sound, they don't have an alphabet. They have these longer, clunkier sounds like a fe or a bay or a b or a an, and they're approximating foreign names out of that. Then often the kind of the transliteration or the way they pronounce that word in Chinese can be quite clunky and very unrecognizable. So or Africa, that's pretty much standards. It's one or the other. It's pretty much a binary state. This is
Coffee.
This is nearly always coffee.
From
Cafe.
Okay. How commonly do you come across morphine or endorphins? Okay. So essentially 3 meanings behind this because they're all approximating loan words. And then we have this guy. Now, this what we can see here straight away is this is a lefty-righty structure. We have our Cluedo style hint and our pronunciation. Now this is a vertical structure. So straight away we're not entirely sure which is the pronunciation hint. Now it turns out the bottom part is the fei, and this is pronounced exactly like fei. The top part is our Cluedo style hint as to the meaning. Now this thing here at the top, this line with the 2 lines down through it, represents plants. Any kind of plant, aspects of a plant or an actual plant. So the original meaning of this is rich, luxuriant, and rich with fragrance. Now it's not used a lot for that. It's more commonly used for
the name Fei.
Fei. Fei.
the female name Fei, or many foreign names with a Fei in them. So, for example, Philippines will have this Fei. Murphy's Law, Mo Fei, will use this Fei. There's quite a number of Feis, and this can get down to the more abstract and more confusing side of Chinese languages. When you're reading through and you spot something like this, are they talking about something luxuriant and rich in fragrance, or are they approximating someone's name Fei? And even if you sound it out, you may be quite off the original. Nevertheless, this is the way the system works. So this is essentially a binary state thing, original meaning and Africa. This is coffee or morphine endorphins, and this is pretty much any Western sound where they're trying to get that Fei sound in. This is Fei.
Fei.
Great. So this Fei character seems to be working well as a pronunciation hint, even though, so on the right here, great. Even though it's on the bottom here, it's still working as a pronunciation hint. But then when you get to things like crime or guilt, this is a little net on top.
Guilt or crime.
Okay. This is actually
a crime.
this is actually pronounced Zui. So it's actually it rhymes with Fei, let's say. Now that's a stretch, because if the only memory link is that it rhymes with Fei, then there's that incorporates quite a spectrum of sounds. So it rhymes with Fei. It's Zui. Here we have generation.
Generation.
The older generation.
This is Bei, which also rhymes with Fei, but it's definitely not Zui. So it rhymes, it is. This is a funny one because the bottom one, here, this was the pronunciation hint, but in this one, it's actually the top bit that we don't know how to say yet is the pronunciation hint. So yeah, these pronunciation hints can be quite hit and miss. When they work though, it's great. And hey, if you can remember stuff that rhymes, this also rhymes, this is another bay. If you can remember though that it rhymes, you can also leverage that as a memory tool. It's not as ideal though as when it's bang on. So yeah, that's essentially how so we've seen how we get these kind of bi-state emojis.
Something.
It is undoing me.
Fay.
It's also shorthand for Africa.
Okay, so super common country names are plus their original meaning. If it's a common one, like ones that are kind of made up to work as loan word replacements.
Coffee. Fay.
The
Fay from coffee, and then we have this kind of super generic
the
Fay.
name Faye.
Fay.
For the Philippines, Murphy's Law, Mo Fay, Fay the girl's name, and that list is there's quite a few Fays in there. Memphis, Dogfish, Eiffel Tower, Fillet, Springfield, Rockefeller, Parfait, Philippine Maid, Phelps, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Sheffield, Mount Everest. Whoa, yeah. So this Fay is quite a generic one, and it stands in there. So if you encounter it, you're almost. I mean, if you see this, it's pretty much guaranteed it's coffee. Unless it's morphine or endorphins. You see this, it's pretty much either Africa or in or on, inhuman, unlawful, uncommon. But this guy, yeah, it is quite an exhaustive list. So that's when a lot of experience comes in handy. Again, the pronunciation hint works really well here, even though it's kind of misplaced because it's not a left-right structure. But then all of a sudden we have a rhyming one, and a rhyming one, and a rhyming one, and a one where it's the top bit that's actually the pronunciation hint, and this is just not connected. So that's essentially how names of things work.
If you'd like to know more, or use our platform to run a really fun Chinese program, reach out to us at newbiechinese.com. Link below. 再见.